You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of St. Paul's Letters to America. This is the program that asks, what if St. Paul were alive today and was here to write a letter to America? What if he was able to see what's going on in our country and was able to send us his thoughts? He was able to tell us what he thinks we ought to hear, what words of wisdom he might have for us. What would he say? Well, in this program, we're going to tell you what he would say. And as we do this, we're going to talk about two things people usually say never to talk about together at the same time, religion and politics. We're going to try to combine, well, not exactly politics on this one, on this program today, but religion and social issues, just cultural issues. And we're going to see if we can make the two mix and see if we can come up with anything that we can regard as reliable or true or the right path based on what we can hear from a letter from St. Paul to America. And why is it that we think that we can give you that kind of a letter? Well, the reason is very simple. The things that St. Paul wrote were true. Truth doesn't change over time. It remains the same. In all places, for all people, at all times, it remains the same. And St. Paul's writings have lasted for years and years and years because they contain, we conjecture, and we're going to allege, and we're going to try to prove, they contain the truth. Well, let's see, shall we? The letter that we have from St. Paul is this: only with difficulty does one die for a just person, though perhaps for a good person one might even find the courage to die. But God proves his love for us in that, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And we're going to relate that. We're going to see if we can make good on a challenge that we've given ourselves. We're going to see if we can relate this to an event that happened at a college in Georgia, which is now the subject of a Supreme Court case. There's a Supreme Court case in which oral arguments are about to be heard. They'll be heard this coming week. And we're going to see if we can apply this letter to the Supreme Court case. Because if St. Paul's writings express truths that could apply to people 2,000 years ago, and they can apply today because they are true, then we ought to be able to do this. We ought to be able to apply it to the Supreme Court case. Well, let's see if we can. Now, before we get into the Georgia College issue, what is there in this letter? What is the message in this letter? Well, St. Paul is telling us that God died for our sins. God died for our sins. Now, what if you don't even believe in God? What if you don't believe that Christ lived, died, rose from the dead? What if you don't believe any of that? There's still a principle in the writing from St. Paul. And the principle is this: that the highest can sacrifice for the lowest. Is that a truth? Is that something that we can base our relations with other people on? Is that something we can base our relationships in our own families, in our friends, in our communities, in our country? Can we base, for example, an entire society, an entire country on that principle? Well, what if we did? Did the highest serve the lowest? That, in fact, is the basis of our Constitution. The government serves the people, and each person has rights in and of themselves, just any individual, no matter what kind of individual you are. You could be rich, you could be poor, whatever. You could be young, you could be old, it doesn't matter. You have constitutional rights that the government has to listen to, obey, comply with, that has to honor, that the government has to bow to those individual rights. That is what has kept our country for all these years being a place where people can feel free. People can feel they have value. That people can feel that they're not going to get trampled on. Perhaps that's why people have come to these shores from other countries for so long. Now, if that's the principle, let's see if we can apply it to this case in Georgia. What is going on in Georgia? Well, there was a fellow, I'm going to have a heck of a hard time trying to pronounce his name, but I'll do my best. There's a student at Georgia Gwinnett College in a suburb of Atlanta. His name was Chike, or Chikey. I'll go with Chike. Uzugbunam. I told you it wasn't going to be easy. Anyways, he was a student at Georgia Gwinnett College, and he sought to share with the students on campus a funny message. He wanted to share with the students on campus a message that salvation and eternal life are available through Christ Jesus. That Jesus, in fact, what he wanted to tell people is that Jesus died for our sins and that we could have eternal salvation on account of it. It's the same message that was in this letter from St. Paul, right? That Christ proved his love for us. God proved his love for us. The highest authority proved love, acted out love for the lowest, for sinners, for people. God sacrificed for people, and not only for any people, but for people who were sinners, people who rejected him, people who declined to follow him, obey his commandments. Those people, he died for. The highest serving the lowest. And that was the message that Mr. Uzugbunam wanted to convey. Well, how did he try to do it? Well, at first, he just picked out a spot outside the student library on campus and started trying to engage people in one-on-one conversations. I think he had some pamphlets that he was going to hand out if people wanted them. And he just tried to approach people. Well, he got approached by the campus police. And they said, you can't do that. Now, mind you, what if we stopped right there and not go any further? This guy wasn't forcing himself on other people. He wasn't being aggressive. He was just approaching people, and if they wanted to engage in a conversation with him, then he would proceed to do so. Two people deciding to discuss something together. If you didn't want to, fine, you passed by. That was that. But the police then came. The police. Why would the police have to intervene in this? But the police did. Just talking to somebody. The police came and they said, you can't do it. Why can't you do it? Well, you're violating our speech code. If you want to do this kind of, proselytizing, if you want to speak out for some cause, whatever it is, you have to go to the Office of Student Integrity. And they were in charge of the campus speech code and the campus speech policy. And what that policy and that code said was, isn't that an interesting thing, to have a speech code? So there's a code, and this is not an unusual thing. Upwards of 90%, maybe 99%. I think I heard 99. Anyways, a huge percentage of colleges and universities across this country have speech codes. We have our building code with regulations on how you're going to build a building to make sure it's safe. Stairs got to be, so wide. You've got to have, in commercial buildings, you've got to have fire sprinkler systems, et cetera, et cetera. We have building codes. This is what you have to do. We have codes of laws, and these laws tell us what we can and can't do, And now we have a speech code to tell us what we can and cannot say. Well, unfortunately, that's what's happening. In any event, this particular college had a speech code and a speech policy that said, hey, if you want to engage in any kind of, talk as an organization, or as I say, if you want to speak out on if you have some kind of agenda, you want to, speak, with regard to any particular cause, well, you can do that, but you have to do it in one of two places on campus. And those two places, there was a patio and a sidewalk, and it comprised 1/1,500% of the available space on the college. Just think about that. Here in this country, you can talk freely. You've got free speech on 1/1,000th of the area of the campus. You have to go to if you want to speak freely, you've got to go to certain places. So not only do we have a speech code in a lot of colleges telling us things you can't say, but now where you can go to say it. And not only that, but when. These particular free speech zones, so-called, they were entitled, or they were labeled as a forum for free and open expression of divergent points of view by students and student organizations. That sounds really good. However, besides the fact that they're restricted to two small locations, they're only open 2 to 4 hours each weekday. And on weekends, they were closed entirely. So you can have your free speech. You can only have it a couple hours every day, and not on weekends, and only in certain places. And you have to reserve the time. If you want to use one of those two spaces, you have to go and get a permit. You have to go and get permission. You have to reserve the time. And if you do reserve the time, and you have your 1 hour, 2 hour sessions, whatever you're allotted, and then you want to do it again, you can do it again. You can make another reservation to do it a second time, but you got to wait 30 days. And it doesn't matter if nobody else is using that speech zone in the interim. You still have to wait the 30 days. So this is a heck of a right that people have to speak freely. I mean, remember now, the college said that this was, a forum where students can, freely express divergent points of view. This is, a great thing. I mean, aren't we so liberal and giving and and generous? But you can only do it a little tiny bits of time and in tiny little places, and you got to get permission. It sounds like it's anything but free speech. In any event, so this is what the campus police told them. You had to go to the Office for Student Integrity, and you had to go ask to reserve a space. So he went there, and he said, he asked, to reserve a space. He asked if he could, distribute literature outside these two little locations. They said no. He said, could he engage in one-on-one conversations outside of these two particular places? They said no. So, supposing you just started talking with a person, supposing you weren't staging an event, you were just having a one-on-one conversation with somebody. Are you possibly running perhaps you're talking religion. Perhaps you're trying to convince them they should convert to your religion. Perhaps you're trying to convince them that they should convert to no religion, that God is a falsehood, that atheism is the best way. Supposing you want to convince them about anything you want to convince them about, and you're having some one-on-one conversation, are you running afoul of the rules of the code? I mean, it can get absurd relatively quickly. In any event, so they told him no, he couldn't do that, and that he had to reserve his space. So he said, okay. So then he reserved a space. And so then he went when he had, his reserved time, and he started to try to, talk to people about Jesus Christ. And he was approached by the campus police again. Why? Well, this time they said, well, we've got some calls on you. Police lieutenant came to him and said, we have had some calls on you. And that he had only reserved, then another policeman came to him and said, you had only reserved the zone for one-on-one conversations and literature distribution, not open-air speaking. Apparently he was just, engaging in a little soapbox kind of discussion as opposed to just approaching people one-on-one. And so that was outside the confines of his permit. So they faulted him for that. And then they also said to him, so you're allowed in certain hours, in certain places, and in certain ways to engage in your free speech. You're only allowed to have one-on-one conversations in these two particular zones, in these restricted times. You can't just, speak out loud, not disturbing the peace, just if you have a normal tone of voice, you can't do it. You can't. So now, how you can express yourself. We're going to tell you how you can engage in free speech. And this, forget calling it free speech. It's a waste of time to call it free speech. We're going to tell you how you're going to be able to exercise your regulated speech, your permitted speech. You got to get a permit. Your permitted speech. It's not free speech. Okay, but even that, there's more. Even besides that, they said, we've got some calls on you. You are now guilty of disorderly conduct. You're disturbing the peace. You're disturbing the peace and comfort of those in the speech zone. So you're only allowed to go into certain small speech zones. And if anybody happens to be in that speech zone who is not comfortable with what you're saying, you are guilty. You are guilty. They've gotten some calls, and somebody called in, somebody said they're not comfortable with what's being said. You're guilty. Their speech code had said that basically people have the right to be comfortable. And if you say anything that causes people to be uncomfortable, that is not allowed. So this is now a constitutional issue. This is now coming before the Supreme Court. The precise issue, this is not the precise issue that's before the court, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. But there has been an effort for some years now in this country to promote this idea that if somebody is offended by what you say, even if you didn't intend an offense, if they feel an offense, if they perceive an offense, maybe they're overly sensitive, it doesn't matter. You're guilty. You have to change what you say. Now, we were talking before about this constitutional right that we have for freedom of speech. Is it freedom as long as people are comfortable? In the 1960s, people burned American flags. And some people didn't like it, but it was allowed because they had the right of freedom of speech. They could object to the government. They could burn an American flag. There's a Supreme Court decision that basically said that was legal. They had the constitutional right to say something that was uncomfortable to other people. And now we have a college saying, no, you don't have that right. Now, if you go back to the religious realm, and you talk about Christ, this guy who supposedly died for other people because he had such love for people, He offended lots of people. He told the Pharisees and the elders and the scribes and the lawyers at the time that they were hypocrites. He offended lots of people. He upended the tables of the money changers at the temple. He offended lots of people. So, would he be guilty too? Would they put him in jail? Because that's what they did to this poor student at Georgia Gwinnett College. They threatened him with prosecution. You could have student discipline. You could be reprimanded. You could be, even expelled. But they threatened him with significant, substantial consequences. The officers told them they could prosecute him for disorderly conduct. In any event, at this point, so one of the police officers actually told them that any complaint that is received by the police, the campus police, converts expression into disorderly conduct. You're guilty. Somebody complains, you're guilty. So the law now is in the subjective perception of anybody. How are you supposed to know what's lawful and what's not lawful? I mean, just from a practical standpoint of how you're going to administer this thing, it's a nightmare. But beyond that, it upends what we've believed in this country for 200 years. This has been going on for a lot of years in this country now. You have the right not to be offended by other people. You have the right to force other people not to say things. You have the right to restrict other people's freedom of speech if it offends you. That upends 200 years of what we've believed in this country. That would not have allowed flag burning. Somebody might be offended. All you need is one person to be offended. Sorry, you can't do that. But I want to object to the Vietnam War. Doesn't matter. Sorry, somebody was offended. And if you do it, you're going to go. You're guilty of disturbing the peace. You go to jail. How could anybody ever say anything that wouldn't offend somebody? We'd all be in jail. This now is coming to the Supreme Court. Anyways, the campus police officer, Lieutenant Hughes, actually suggested that Chaik should stop speaking publicly in the speech zone because it was not effective. He should communicate his message more like members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't know how they do it, but maybe it's in a more quiet manner. But anyways, so this is great. You've got police officers, representatives of government. This is a public college. So these campus police are employees of a public government-funded college. I mean, these are government representatives. You have government representatives telling somebody what religion they should choose. This is so unconstitutional, it's laughable. It's what everybody fled England for 200 plus years ago to get here to be free. Anyway, let's see. So the student Chaik questioned, what good is permission? What good does it do to get permission if people could stop his speech by complaining? Exactly. That's what we've just been talking about. You won't be able to say anything because all you need is one person to complain, one person to not like what you're saying. So we can, all of us, have the ability then to stop everybody else's free speech. You can't talk. I don't like what you say. You can't talk. You can't say that. I don't like what you say. You can't say that. Heck of a free speech society we'll have. The officer even opined that he did not think that the Office of Student Integrity would approve open-air speaking in the speech zone because it disturbs people. Again, with this, it disturbs people. Let's see. So this got brought before Director Dowell in the Office of Student Integrity, and he said that it violated college policy for anyone to express a fire and brimstone message on campus. Now, he was not expressing a fire and brimstone message. He was not talking about people burning in hell and all the rest of it. He was talking about salvation and love and all this. Doesn't matter. But you've got a college administrator, a college official, saying in very clear language that religious speech is not allowed. You can characterize it as fire and brimstone. You can characterize it as love and salvation. However you want to characterize it, it's religious speech. That you can't have. Again, this is so unconstitutional. This isn't something that you have to guess at, something that you have to read between the lines. This is something that is explicitly stated in the Constitution. People are entitled to the free exercise of their religion. And the government should not, or will not, or will not be allowed to infringe on that. It's guaranteed in our Constitution. Maybe, some of these educated people at some of these colleges should actually read the Constitution. At any event, I also told them that the school's policy prohibited one-on-one conversations. So to what level does that go? I mean, if you're having a one-on-one conversation in a dorm room, speech police going to come check on it? What kind of one-on-one conversations are allowed? What's not allowed? I mean, this can get absurd. Anyways, so at this point, Chaik was, he was caught in a dead end. I mean, there's no way, for him to do anything. He could only go to certain zones, and then when he went to those zones, anybody who could pass by those zones. I mean, if you don't like someone's message, where you're going to, if somebody's going to try to promote a religious message, he's only going to be in one or two places. And all you got to do is go there and object, and boom, you stopped them. So realizing that he was in a no-win situation, he decided to file a lawsuit, exercise his legal rights. So when he did, the college responded. Now, what did the college say? How could you defend this? I mean, we've said this is egregious. This is so blatantly unconstitutional, it's not even funny. What could the college come up with as a defense? Well, they said that this speech that the student Chaik wanted to use, the basic in the language of the petitioners, his case is now, as I said, before the Supreme Court in a brief filed by the Alliance Defending Freedom, who is acting as his legal counsel. They wrote that his speech, the basic tenets of the Christian faith, again, religious, constitutionally protected religious speech. And by the way, I mean, this is all presuming that, you don't believe the Christian message. Let's just say the Christian message was true. Let's just say he was God. Let's just say that 500 people did see him after he rose from the dead, as is written in the Bible. Let's just say that. Now we're going to outlaw that message. I'll tell you what. How about just let people decide for themselves? If Christ lived and died and rose, if he lived, he died, and then rose from the dead, and it's all true, and he was God, and he came to save people, and you're going to tell people you can't say that? I mean, how do you know whether it's true or not? Why not let other people decide whether it's true or not? Anyway, they wrote that the speech of the student, the basic tenets of the Christian faith, arguably rose. Now, this is the argument. This is the argument now of the school. The petitioners writing, the Alliance Defending Freedom is writing in their brief to the Supreme Court that at the lower court level, the school defended their actions by saying that this speech, the basic tenets of the Christian faith, arguably rose to the level of fighting words and were thus not worthy of First Amendment protection. Close quote. Arguably rose to fighting words. And they're not allowed. It's not allowed First Amendment protection. So we can forget that part of the Constitution which talks about the free exercise of religion. You don't have it. Fighting words? Fighting words? It's hard to sort of speculate or guess what they're talking about. How do you carry someone saying you can live forever, you can have eternal salvation in heaven and joy and love and peace and total happiness, and those are fighting words? Is that the best defense they can come up with? Why are they fighting words? Is it because somebody's offended, but you want to say it anyway, so you're the one engaging in the fight when what you're talking about, as I said, is love and joy and peace and brotherhood and, doing good deeds for your fellow man and all that other, good stuff. Those are fighting words now. If somebody doesn't want to hear that, we can't speculate on what people might think, but let's just say that it is certainly possible that one person who might be offended by that might be a person that's got a chip on their shoulder, might be a person that's just angry, might be a person that's just not happy with things. And to them, they can be fighting words. And why would we let that person, a single person complaining, regulate somebody's freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom to talk about salvation? This is the problem. This becomes these become fighting words when somebody is bothered by them. And then you put the blame on the person, verbalizing the words that the other person is bothered by. What about looking at the person who's supposedly bothered? Are they, unreasonably bothered? Maybe the fault lies with them. This is why we have free speech, because you don't want governments and government officials deciding those kinds of questions. Who should be bothered? Who's properly bothered? You're reasonably bothered, so you have to shut up. No, you're unreasonably being bothered, so this person can talk. You really want the government making those decisions? Anyway, so that was the defense that they came up with. So, what is the issue before the court? Well, from a legal perspective, the case took an interesting turn in that after some delay, the school completely wiped out their policies. Now you can talk freely anywhere on campus, any time of day. There's no more restrictions. They completely did an about-face. As we've been saying, this violates people's constitutional rights in the most egregious fashions. It's not even close. And so the university decided, the college decided, well, yeah, they're probably going to get hammered on this one in the courts, so they changed course. Okay. And then they said, okay, well, now this question is moot, right? There's nothing for the court to do now because what the student was complaining of is gone. Well, the student's not happy with that because it's basically like, well, the government's getting away with violating your constitutional rights, and they just got away with it. The student was asking for nominal damages. Nominal damages are usually like, hey, pay me $1. And it's for the victory, but it's really when in these cases that deal with constitutional rights, when somebody's freedom of expression is violated. Like I said, it could be a flag burner. It could be somebody who's against the government. It could be somebody who is in favor of abortion, and they want, it could be somebody who is upset with, he thinks, he's a Jewish person and he's being oppressed. He's a Muslim person and he's being oppressed. He's whatever and he's being oppressed. You could be on any side of the political spectrum and you're being oppressed. And, if you got, if you've got your speech rights violated, other rights violated, a lot of times you don't have financial damages. You've had a right denied to you. And in most of these constitutional cases that deal with these things, nominal damages is what people ask for. In any event, the court said, well, there's nothing to decide here anymore, so the case is moot. Went to the 11th Circuit, the next level of appellate court, and the 11th Circuit said, yeah, that's right. So if the school reneged and the courts have said, well, there's no problem here anymore, why is it before the Supreme Court? Well, it might be interesting to know that a lot of people are upset with what these lower courts did. It isn't just this student who's bringing this case or arguing to the court that this case should be allowed to go forward, that it's not moot, that there should be a dollar awarded. And like I said, it's the Alliance Defending Freedom that's taken up this case. There are people who believe in the Christian message, and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops filed an amicus curiae brief in the case. They're supporting the petitioner here, in this case, the student. Also, get the name of the organization correctly, the American, got to have it here. It's the American Humanist Association. Yes, that's right, the American Humanist Association. It is the oldest and largest humanist organization. Humanism, according to them, this is in the amicus curiae brief they filed, humanism is a progressive life stance that affirms, without theism, our responsibility to lead meaningful ethical lives to the greater good of humanity. So basically, they're irreligious atheists. They said the mission, again, these are their own words. The mission of the AHA's legal center is to protect the separation of church and state. They get involved in a lot of cases against Christian groups. They want to keep church and state separated. They're usually on the other side of questions like this. And yet, they're supporting this organization, the Alliance Defending Freedom. The AHA said themselves, quote, while the AHA and the Alliance Defending Freedom, hereinafter ADF, stand on opposite sides of the ideological spectrum, they unite in their esteem for First Amendment liberties and their conviction that such rights are meaningless if they cannot be vindicated. You've got people, you've got opposites in agreement. You've got people who are usually on the opposite of every court case. They're coming together on this one. Why? Because it really does go against the heart of what our constitutional rights are all about. If you can have one person say, I am offended, and you can't talk because I am offended, it violates everything that our Constitution, our country has stood for, everything that we were built on. And you've got basically these people who can't agree on anything when you talk about religion in the public sphere, and yet they're agreeing on this because they both agree that this freedom is important, because they realize the danger that's involved with this I'm offended kind of methodology, which is basically that none of us are going to have any freedom anymore. That's how serious this can be. They even went so far as, the AHA went so far, I'm reading this and I can't believe what I'm reading, but they said religious freedom, the cornerstone of our democracy. This is the AHA, the American Humanist Association. Religious, maybe they believe that, to believe in no God is a religious viewpoint as well. Perhaps that's what they're thinking. I don't know for sure. But in any event, just the words that are coming out of their brief, religious freedom, the cornerstone of our democracy. They say it's the cornerstone. Could become an empty promise without nominal damages. And they go on. It's just amazing. They argued that this ruling by the 11th Circuit, the lower appellate court, is so, again, their words, this ruling is so monstrously absurd that religious rivals are fighting on the same side to have it reversed. Government, if in fact this is considered moot because the government backtracked, that's so to say that's okay is monstrously absurd to them. Because why? Because the government will have gotten away with it. They could have violated somebody's rights. They restricted this kid. His college experience was changed. He graduated before this case got resolved. He was harmed. There was a second plaintiff that actually joined him in the lawsuit as well. Same thing. The second plaintiff who joined the lawsuit, a guy named Joseph Bradford, said when he saw what happened to Chike, he was afraid. He wanted to talk about the Bible, but he was afraid. So what happened? This chilled speech, that is the very essence of, a constitutional violation. When you're chilling speech, that's, it's not just the harm to one person. It's the harm to so many other people. When you chill freedoms, then other people become afraid to exercise those freedoms. That's what happened with the second plaintiff. And he graduated too before this case. This case is still not resolved. As I say, it's before the Supreme Court. So that's what these people are upset about. The AHA is upset about this because, what's going to happen next? States can pass laws, and until somebody takes it to the Supreme Court, we'll just maybe some people will get their rights violated in the meantime, and if enough people complain about it, then we'll just change the law. Oh, no harm, no foul. But in the meantime, people have suffered. And that's what people are afraid of. That's why the AHA is coming forward as it has. The AHA also said this: freedom of thought and speech, they are the same. When you curtail freedom of speech, you're trying to curtail freedom of thought. Freedom of thought and speech is the matrix, the indispensable condition of nearly every other form of freedom. You take away this freedom, you basically take away all freedom. If you can't say what you want, what other freedoms are valuable? If you can't say what you want, it's because people are telling you you can't think this. Or you're going to be able to think something in hiding. I mean, there are totalitarian states where that's occurred. We've always prided ourselves that that's not us. And now maybe it's us. So, in the event, and the AHA asked, why would we trade a system that has served us so well for one that has served others so poorly? There are other countries that restrict speech, that have, religious thoughts you can express and religious thoughts you can't. They say this is the proper religion and other religions are not proper. And we haven't been there. That's not who we've been. We've said we've been open to everybody. Our doors are open to everybody. And so the AHA is asking, well, why would we trade our system for, these others? Well, okay. That's interesting. We're not done. It's not just the AHA. CAIR, C-A-I-R, it's the acronym for the Council of American and Islamic Relations. It's the organization that promotes respect for the Muslim faith. It's intent on promoting, founded in 1994, the Council on American and Islamic Relations has a mission to enhance understanding of Islam, protect civil rights, promote justice, and empower Muslim Americans. They filed an amicus curiae brief. Guess which side they took? The students. Oh, and the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, the people that, in the 1950s defended the rights of black students to go to schools of their choice and such. The American Civil Liberties Union that have fought so many battles for racial justice over the decades and so many other causes. American Civil Liberties Union. Guess whose side they took? The Christian kid. Again, it's not, and it's because of this idea that we're all at jeopardy, we're all at risk. If this kind of thinking, I'm offended, you shut up. If that kind of thinking becomes the rule of the day, it is a threat, a danger for all of our freedoms, all of them. But it's funny. As I said, this kind of thinking has been afoot for some years now, and it's funny, but it's getting pretty widely accepted. I'm offended, you shut up. There was a survey that was just done by the University of Wisconsin at Madison. There's an online survey of 530 undergraduate students, and they asked this question: how much do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The government should be able to punish hate speech. 63% said yes. So let's stop there for a second. If you say something, the only thing you've done wrong is you have said something, and it's deemed hate speech. You haven't hit anybody, you haven't shot anybody, you haven't burned any buildings. You said something. You can be punished. 63% of undergraduate students think the government should be able to punish that. 40% agreed that the government should be able to restrict climate change deniers. Restrict them. We don't agree with what you're saying. You've got to be taught a lesson. You can't say that. You're going to be restricted somehow. You're not entitled to your opinion. 50%, the government should be able to restrict the speech of racially insensitive people. You're a bigot. Okay? You don't have the same rights of free speech as other people. Like I said, I'll go back to the flag burning case. You're treasonous. You're bad mouthing the country. You're burning our flag. What should we do to you? Who's going to be on the wrong end of this? Tomorrow, it could be the people you don't like. Tomorrow, the day after that, it could be you. Why would we trade our system for other systems that haven't worked so well? The Nazis did this. You said something against the Nazi state, we're coming after you. Why would we trade our system for somebody else's that hasn't worked so well? Anyways. So that's a social issue. That's a legal issue. That's an interesting cultural issue. But, we started out with something very different. We started out with a reading from Paul. Now, Paul's got things in his letters about freedom, about the worth of the individual human being, and we could have talked about those. But instead, we started with this letter where he said, God proved his love for us by dying for people who had rejected him. If you believe in a God who would do that, if you believe or don't believe in God, the fact is, what kind of a model is that? That somebody would sacrifice for somebody else who has rejected them. That is not, I'm offended, you shut up. The model that's suggested in St. Paul's letter is, I'm offended, I will tolerate you. Or, I'm offended, what can I do to serve you? I'm offended, what can I do to show my love for you? It's an exact opposite of I'm okay, you shut up. So, if St. Paul values somebody suffering, if Christ is the ultimate example for how we should act, if St. Paul, writes to say that this model, this Jesus Christ, is the example for how we should act, how we should treat other people, then we should also suffer for people who cause us difficulty. We should suffer for them. We should suffer out of love for them. If that is true, and it is, and as it is, the opposite of I'm okay, you shut up, then I'm okay, you shut up is not what we should be doing. And all of these groups are coming together, these groups that are enemies in every other case that they've been involved together with. If they're coming together to all say, I'm okay, you shut up, is a problem. Because it blows up our cherished, time-worn constitutional rights. It's because they all think, all of these different types of people think that those constitutional rights are correct. They're true. The principle, I'm okay, you shut up, is not love. That's why it's not true. That's why it won't last for thousands of years. That's why it's not going to last past this Supreme Court decision, hopefully. It will. People will still engage in it. People will still think this is the right thing to do. The survey we just talked about proves that. But as a matter of law, hopefully we never agree with that. Hopefully the Supreme Court case will help buttress at least the legal impropriety of that, kind of thinking. But this is what we're talking about, that legal principles that we have, constitutional principles that we have, they can be consistent with the religious principles that St. Paul writes about. And there's one reason for them both to end up with the same result. And that's because they're true. There's something they share and it's true. So we just offer that out there for you. That, and I'll add this. If St. Paul writes something that is, and he writes one thing that's true, maybe some of the other things he writes as well are true. And maybe we should listen to him. And maybe this, particular program has, maybe you've been listening to this program, maybe you're listening to what we've said about this writing of St. Paul. Maybe you're listening to this writing of St. Paul with a little bit of a different perspective. Maybe, hopefully this has been of interest to you. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I hope so. And I hope you join us again when we talk about, something else and compare it through the prism of the writings of St. Paul and see if we can come up with what we think we can reliably say, yeah, it's true, or it's got a heck of a better chance of being true than not. So anyways, thank you again. I hope you join us again. Until the next time, God bless.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.